I'm David Vandermeer here at Hospice House in Concord, New Hampshire. I met Dr. Cooper 5 years ago when she started work on creating a new private high school in Manchester, New Hampshire. It was designed around the highly successful teaching approach she developed as a college professor. Liberty Harbor Academy is the product of that effort and where I served as chairman of the board during its initial startup phase. At the end of the 2012-2013 school year, Liberty Harbor Academy graduated its first class of 16 students. Midway through the next school year, Dr. Cooper was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She has bravely battled the cancer so she could see her teaching approach take root. Now, as Dr. Cooper nears the end of her life's journey, it is my privilege to introduce her last lecture entitled Birth, Death, and Immortality, the Final Chapter, Coming Home. This is addressed to her former students, faculty, friends, and family. As you listen to Dr. Cooper, may you find encouragement to live your life more fully and commit yourself to be more fully present for those you love. Now, Dr. Cooper.
My name is Julianne Cooper, and I'm here to report on my life story, mainly because it's almost at an end. About a year ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and I've been fighting, been through a few bouts of chemotherapy, and I'm now down to a few weeks, so they tell me. So I'm going home. But it's been a long trek to figure out the fact that I'm going home. I got diagnosed with cancer. I dealt with that finally. I then went through chemo and thinking that after all, lots of people with pancreatic cancer have survived long periods of time. And I finally come to the understanding that going home means a lot more than walking away, walking out of cancer. I've been spending most of my life figuring out what is going on around us and what is happening. I know all of you have noticed that our traditions have been dwindling. We have been losing our traditions in this country, with the family, in our own lives. So while I'm working on coming home and walking toward a new and changing life, I'm going to give you a little assignment. You need to think about coming home. You need to think about being present with your family and yourself. You need to think about what it means to have the full and rich life of traditional understanding and values. We need to rethink what that means to us and the witnesses around us, your family, your children, your colleagues, yourself. One of the things that I did years ago is I began to talk about birth, death, and immortality, not just in an academic sense, although I did a course on it, which I'll talk about in a moment, but also because it was the goal of my teaching to help create in the people I was teaching a sense of the ability to use their own stories and their own lives to punctuate the courses, to punctuate what they were learning. I've done a whole lot of stuff in my life, so have you. I've been a housewife and a mother. I've been a church secretary, a bank teller, not a very good one. Used to have to stay after a lot and figure out where the nickel went that I can't find. An office manager, got fired from that one. Probably should have been fired, actually. Manager of a music school, owner and CEO of an advertising and marketing agency. In between, I learned to fly a Cessna 172, actually soloed. Two of the things I'm most proudest of, is that possible? Most proudest? Are the founding of a company called Public Virtues that is an ethics relations firm, and as far as I can know, the only one, and something called Liberty Harbor Academy. And it is Liberty Harbor Academy that has held and housed and began to bring back as many of those traditions as we've been capable of. I've been teaching in the university for 25 years now, and it began to be apparent literally within days of my teaching that something had happened to high school students and high school education since I went to high school. And many of you who are my age are saying, well, I went to high school and I had a great experience. It worked beautifully. Look at me, I've done a good job. But what we have to remember is over that 25 years, school has changed dramatically. We have lost our traditions. We have forgotten our traditions. We are literally now into the third generation of young people who have not even gotten their traditions. You and I, if you're close to my age, and I'm in my 60s, I'm not going to give away exactly how old I am, but people my age remember the traditions. We got them. People our children's age didn't get so much. They got less traditional material, fewer stories, and by now, certainly since the 80s and 90s, our young people are getting revisionist history. They're getting the revised version of what went on in the past, what our history looked like, what our traditions look like. That's why it's time to regain them. It's time to reclaim. Well, about 20 years ago, I was teaching at the University of New Hampshire at Manchester, and I was asked to create a course in the humanities, any topic in the humanities. And I chose to do a course called Birth, Death, and Immortality. In fact, it's been renamed by some of the people around me, Birth, Life, Death, and Immortality. That's kind of funny because I almost said immorality. And the second year the course was running, we opened the course catalog, and the course had been renamed Birth, Death, and Immorality. So I had more people sign up that semester than other semesters. When they found out it was immortality, they stayed, though. So the course was about what have people believed, what have people thought, how have people explained who they are, what they are, where they're going through those moments in life, those turning points in life of birth, death, and immortality. How do they look at life after death? By the way, it's been around since as early as we can find. Neanderthal are believed to have believed in a life after death. Why did I do this? And I was asked this recently by a colleague. Why did you create this course? Why choose this topic? And it really made me think about how I created topics for all my courses. And they're all about regaining tradition. So when I say that regaining tradition, going back to and figuring out what our traditions were, I'm talking about having this idea and trying to do this for years before we actually began Liberty Harbor. So the course, Birth, Death, and Immortality, was really meant to help our students figure out how they could tell the traditional stories, how they could deal with the traditions in their own lives. How could we bring literally millennia of human history and mistakes and trial and error on how to deal with life? How could we bring all those lessons forward to our young people today and to ourselves? I had many adults who took the class and said their lives had literally been changed by understanding these traditions and understanding where they came from. I had one couple, actually the wife was taking the course, And it turned out that 20 years prior to that, she had lost a child virtually at birth. They had gotten all the way through the 9 months, and the child had been born dead. Neither she nor her husband had spoken about this incident since. She went home after we had one of our classes on birth and physical birth, which was one of the lecture series, and told her husband that she would like to go to the grave of her child, of their child. And the husband got very upset, but finally agreed. They went down to Massachusetts, found the graveyard, and could not find the baby's grave. And suddenly the husband fell on the ground and began to dig in the grass and try desperately to find the marker, because all they had put there was a marker. And when they couldn't find it, they went and got the cemetery gardener who found it. And the husband collapsed on the ground and sobbed. After that, on the ride home, they talked about it for the first time in their entire marriage. When she came in that next week and told me the story, she said it was like she and her husband had just gotten married again, and they had started over in their marriage. So learning these kinds of traditions and beginning to live them in your own life and to understand them for yourself can change your life in the course of your life. This is one of the main reasons why colleges and universities need desperately to begin to bring back those traditions. And I'm going to charge you with bringing them back in your own life, beginning to look for and deal with those traditions as you bring them to yourself. And at the same time, learn ways that you can transfer to other people. You can say to other people, tell me your stories. Tell me what you're seeing. Tell me how you are helping someone to bring back those traditions. We've been talking about witnessing traditions. We've been talking about reliving, reconstituting, in a sense, what I have lived through. Let's talk just a little bit about Birth, Death, and Immortality as a course to help the students understand their lives and what they're living through, and hopefully to be able to pass that on. I do have one little story about a student who went through most of the course, had not quite gotten to the immortality stage of the course, and her grandmother became very ill and died in a couple of days. Very suddenly. She went home, and her mother, this was her mother's mother, her mother didn't know what to do, had never actually been involved in a funeral or a death. And my student was able to step in. She was 18. She was able to step in. She said she grabbed her notebook from Birth, Death, and Immortality and went home with her notebook because she knew she was going to be able to help. And in essence, she became the point person for dealing with her grandmother's death and the funeral and putting things together and having the family come together. It made a huge difference, not only in her ability to deal with her grandmother's death, but also her position in the family. Her ontology, her place in the family began to change because she understood things from a different point of view. And she taught her family. She brought traditions back to her family that the family didn't even know they were missing. And when she came back after that family emergency, she came into my office and recounted what she had learned about her family by insisting that they become involved too. One of the things we learn in Birth, Death, and Immortality is that birth, death, and ideas of immortality are not about the individual. They're about the community. They're about leaving legacies, about being able to be present, wholly present in the presence of others, to be able to ask others their story, and to bring to bear their story and your story and the stories of the people around you on your own life and on the lives of the family, which I think she did a beautiful job of in her ability to deal with her grandmother. She'll be able to do that the rest of her life. Student after student, even now, 20 years after students took the course, have heard about my cancer and are coming to see me and telling me how the Birth, Death, and Immortality course changed their whole family dynamic. So learning, figuring out traditions, asking your family, starting with your family. Your family has traditions that maybe nobody ever talked about. Go talk to your grandparents. Go talk to the oldest members of your family and find out their traditions and who they are. You're going to be really surprised, I promise you. And you're going to change what you think about and how you see traditions within your own family. So Birth, Death, and Immortality was one of the places that became a repository of the lessons I had been learning over 25 years of teaching, and that I had realized during that time needed to be reinvoked. Liberty Harbor Academy, a private high school, was based on bringing these traditions back, not only within an intellectual life, which is only part of it, but through the life of the senses, through the life of the environment, through how the school was built, the kinds of things that one saw at the school, the presence of the books, the presence of our founding fathers very much alive, the presence of the students and their families. It is and has to begin with you. It has to begin with you and your family. The witnesses, you as a witness, and the witnesses who witness to your life, the integrity, the understanding, the wish, the hope for finding those traditions and bringing them back to your family and bringing them to a larger existence. Let's go back for just a moment to the concept of the founding and the organization of Birth, Death, and Immortality, so that I can tell one last small story, bringing that forward, bringing this tradition forward, because it has become a tradition of my teaching career to teach at least once a year a course in Birth, Death, and Immortality. I've taught it at Liberty Harbor Academy to high school students who have had very much the same reaction as the college students, and the parents have learned a great deal too. Since I'm giving you a report on my life, I want to finish that report with my coming home. And one of the stories that made me realize that that's exactly what I was doing, and I had accomplished what I set out to when I created the course. I told my students at Liberty Harbor Academy this past year, along with my nieces and nephews and young people who I knew, my grandchildren especially, that they were welcome at any time to ask as many questions as they wanted to. They needed to, if they wanted to know how it felt to have cancer, if they wanted to know anything about what I had been dealing with, I wanted them to use it as a learning experience as much as they could. So a group of students came to hospice here in Concord to see me. And I said, shoot away, what are your questions? And one young man, sort of tearfully, said, Dr. Cooper, you've been teaching Birth, Death, and Immortality forever. Now that you have experienced cancer, how would you teach it differently? Wow. How would you teach it differently? Hadn't thought of that, and it was a little scary to have to answer. I didn't do a very good job, I'm afraid. But I did tell him that he needed to come back and I would have a better answer for him after I thought about it. But there's a big difference between intellectualizing birth, death, and immortality and the traditions it teaches, and living birth, death, and immortality in the traditions. Without having those traditions, birth, death, and immortality doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So when I admonish you, and I admonished you at the beginning that I was giving you an assignment, that assignment is that, again, that you need to look around. You need to look at what's happening in your own family, beginning with your own life and those closest to you. Because those people closest to you are your witnesses. A friend of mine once said that he had heard that one marries because you need a spouse to witness your life. You need someone to be the witness to who you are and how you live your life. Think about those witnesses in your family. You have your parents, your siblings, your spouse, your children. What kind of witnesses will your children be when it comes to witnessing your life? And when you come to the end of your life, as I am about to, and I'm very blessed with the ability to look at my life, to have the chance to and the time to assess, look at my life before going home. And I see it very much as going home. It also means that we have to come home to our traditions. Our humanity has created important traditions to mark the milestones through every step of our existence. They've given us the ideas, the concepts have given us witnesses to our lives. They have given us the traditional understanding of how those traditions work within everyone's life and the between, because the relationships are as important as the traditions themselves. The presence, the ability to be present in your own life, as well as being present in the lives of those people around you who are close. So think about it. Think about your life. Think about the presence. Think about how you listen and witness, and how witnesses are using your life as an example. And finally, I ask you to come home. Come home to those traditions. Come home to your family. Come home to yourself. Be present in your own life. And ask yourself, when my time comes, will I have the time, and if I have the time, to tell the story of my life and to understand it as a coming home? How will witnesses talk about it? So think about how you can witness your own life, how you can witness the people around you, and how you can help them, especially, to become witnesses on your behalf and on their own behalf. Let's take back our traditions. Let's give our children and our grandchildren a chain of humanity and a chain of tradition unbroken. It's stretched to the limit. Let's make sure it has enough slack to continue to hold together our humanity and your own, and pass it on. Come home, please.